Zambia's 60th independence is here. Are you ready to celebrate in style? Get your exclusive and wear your style of Zambia at 60 t-shirts and proudly stand out. Show your love for Zambia with a design that's bold, unique, and perfect for this special day. One shirt is just $40 or grab two for $70. It's the perfect way to share the pride with friends and family. Ready to order? It's easy. Send your payment via Zelle, +1 817 501 1615 or Cash App, $Pastor For questions, email us at zbtr2009@gmail.com. Don't wait, pre-order now, wear your style, and let's celebrate Zambia's freedom in style.
Hi everybody, welcome to the show. It is Saturday, October the 12th, and when we get into the month of October, generally what happens for those of us who are Zambians, wherever we are around the world, we get into independence celebration mode. So ZBTR, over the 16 years of existence, what we have done is we dedicate October to sort of feature guests that help us to reflect and run through Zambia's history, the things that happen. You can look at it from different angles and perspectives. I want to encourage you, tell a friend that ZBTR is live and share the link and follow us on social media. We are simply ZBTR. We are on X, we are on Facebook, and we are on YouTube. So in light of that, we decided to look back or look into our vast community and look at one of our gallant citizens who would come to the show to come and talk about the journey of Zambia, reflecting on Zambia's 60 years, which is a milestone. So today, we are very privileged and honored to have Her Majesty Princess Ambassador Dr. Inonge Mbikusta Lewanika as our guest, and she's joining us from Lusaka, Zambia. Dr. Lewanika, in family circles, we simply call her Mom Ambassador, but for the sake of this discussion, we shall be calling her Ambassador. Ambassador, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us. The last time you were here, you were saying goodbye to the Zambian community. You were moving to Brussels. You remember that?
Yes, I do. Yes. Good day, good blessing, whatever time it is you are watching. Thank you, Pastor Nkama, for inviting me. I am happy to be back after a decade plus.
Yes, it is actually. Now, before we get into our conversation, the other day you were the keynote speaker at, is it the National Breakfast? Prayer Breakfast?
Zambia, the third Zambia National Prayer Breakfast, like the one you have in Washington.
Okay, all right. How did it go?
We were so blessed. It went very well. The head, it was hosted for the first time by our parliament.
Yes.
Blessed by our Honorable Madam Speaker, Nelly Muti, because normally the National Prayer Breakfasts are done by the legislature. of one of the arms of government all over the country.
Yes.
The first and second were done by the committee and ministers and ambassadors of the Lord Jesus Christ. But finally, our parliament have taken hold of it, owned it, and they hosted it. And they do have a Zambian Parliamentary Christian Caucus, which was launched by Madam Speaker last year.
Excellent.
So from now on, it's their baby. They'll host it with our support. It went on very well. And I must thank the private sector in Zambia for supporting it with material support. It was a great gathering. We had friends from Kenya and Malawi. Kenya has had their national prayer breakfast for over 20 years. And Zambia helped Malawi have their first one last month.
Okay. Excellent. So you are from the royal establishment or royal family of the Barot's royal establishment. So being a princess, you were naturally born at Lialui, where the palace is, right? Is there? No. Okay.
First of all, I am a member of the royal family. Barot's royal establishment is the people, like parliament. I think many people have been making. Barot's royal establishment is not a family. It represents the people of the whole kingdom. It's like a parliament. They have representatives. It's theirs. But I am a member of the royal family. I was born in Sinanga.
Okay.
When my mother was on maternity leave from Usakile African Township. So I am really say I grew up from infancy to about 17 years in Usakile African Township.
In Kitwe?
In Kitwe, yes.
My
mother was a teacher at Nkana School, Usakile now. Our parents, Honorable Hari Mwanga Nkumbula was the headmaster, and our parent, Honorable Simon Mwansakapwepwe, was also teaching at that school, I think as deputy, but specializing in adult education.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. So you grew up in Kitwe, and how did you navigate? How did you find yourself at Chipembe Secondary School? You went to Chipembe, right?
Yes, I did. So did my mother. My mother went in 1937. She walked from her village to the Zambezi River, crossed the river mostly by swimming, went to Mongu, got on a lorry, as we used to call it those days. I think these days you call it a truck.
Yeah.
To Mlobezi, got on a train from Mlobezi to Chisamba at age 16 and walked 20 miles walking from Chisamba railway station to Chipembe Girls School. It was the only national school for many years. It was run by the Methodist Church. Okay. So most of people my age and a bit older, when we finished our primary schools, wherever we were in Zambia, we ended up at Chipembe. It was not easy to get there because they chose really the top academics who had passed that year.
So what happened to those who didn't have very good grades? Where did they go for secondary?
We didn't have many secondary schools. Actually, after standard 6, many people went into the teacher training in various parts of Zambia. And then later, we had Chikankata in Southern Province as a sort of a national nursing training school.
Interesting. What notable names were in your intake that we can remember or relate to?
You know many of them. There were about 200 girls. I went in standard 2, which is about grade 4. Chipembe had a primary school, a secondary school, and a teacher training college. Okay. Among the notables that you may know who were a bit older than us was Dr. Mtumbabul, who was the first female in Northern Rhodesia to get a PhD. You have Madam Gwendoline Coney, who was the first, she was actually the first African woman in the Legislative Council, and she was recommended by Malao Nkumbula. So technically, Mr. Nkumbula is the one who recommended Miss Gwenny Coney to be a member of the Legislative Council. And as you know, later she was the first female ambassador to the United Nations.
Yes.
And you have Mrs. Lily Monze, whose father actually was one of those who kicked off our liberation officially in a big way in Kafue. Mr. Monze, Mr. Mubitana, that is Lily Monze. So Lily Monze was our school captain. She was among those notables. And you'll be happy to know, probably you know, most of that generation became leaders in Zambia in various fields.
Yes, they did. So when you say Lily Monze kicked off the liberation in Kafue, can you give a little bit more details about that? What exactly happened?
No, I mean, it's not, Lily Monze was the daughter of one of those. Yes, actually, if we go to liberation, my father, the late Litunga, Lewanika Mbikusta, attempted to start the movement in 1929 when he was 24, and President Kaunda obviously was 5 years old. But it was foiled by the colonial government because Africans, that's what they called people our color, were not allowed to have a political party. So this gathering of like-minded, like Mr. Mubitana, my father, and several others were in Kafue to map up the strategy to liberate Zambia. And around that time, because Africans, my color, were not allowed to have political parties, they formed welfare society. And actually, President Kaunda's father, it's interesting that he's never mentioned in the history, was a member of the welfare society, his father. So that was the meeting at Kafue, and that attempt, you know, sort of spread out to more people to get geared for liberation. So finally, after another decade, my father was the first president of the Northern Rhodesia African National Congress in 1948, and Mr. Nabuliato was the secretary. And at the same time, actually, my father initiated the trade union movement because in their days, Africans were casual laborers. You worked every day. If you go, no sick leave, no pension, no retirement. So it was an injustice. And my father, like people his age, were really for justice for all people, including their own people. Then after my father, who initiated the trade unions, came our father, Mr. Lawrence Katilungu, who is actually was a prince from Luwingu and related to the Chitimukulu Minelubemba family.
How did your father balance the responsibilities of being Litunga and heading a political movement?
My father became Litunga in 1968.
Okay.
Many years later, many years later.
Okay.
And you will be interested to know that he was also a lay preacher. He translated the Bible in Silozi in the 1930s. He also translated the Pilgrim's Progress in Silozi. He was an author also of several books.
So the thing of writing books that we see in you, you've also written many books. My sister Bomwaka has written many books. Prince Akashambatwa has written many books. So that's where it comes from, right?
It also comes from our mother, who was a school teacher and taught some of our leaders, like you remember Ambassador Otema Msuka.
Yes.
And you remember Mr. Muila, who was in FAS, was that FAS? Was a student. She trained and taught some of our leaders who became, after independence, were leaders.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Let's go back to your life. I want us to go back to your life. So after Chipembi, you ended up in the United States. Can you tell us about that journey and that experience?
Let me just tell you a bit about life in the African townships.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
So first of all, we lived in D5 in Usakile, and and also D5. We had communal bathrooms and toilets. You just go there, whether there are 10 of you, you go and do bathroom at the same time. And then after some years, we moved to the part of the location in Usakire, which was called Maspesha, for senior clerks. That's where our parents, Mr. Katilungu, lived. The Mwenechanyas, who were from Malawi, also lived there. Mr. Nkoloma, who was a youth of my father following him around, also lived there. So we moved at Maspesha. And for the young people, they will be interested to know, by 8 or 10 years old, this lady who's talking now used to wake up early in the morning, put a showmaker for people to bath, the whole family, clean the house, clean the yard, and make breakfast at 8 years old.
Wow. Wow. And
then at 10, to go back to Chipembe now, at 10 years old at Chipembe, it was a Methodist mission school. But in addition to the academics, we collected firewood every Friday. We did our own cooking on 3-legged pots. So every Friday we went to collect firewood. We stamped our own maize in, what do they call it in English? Chika in Zozi. You know where you stamp maize? It's a mortar.
Yes.
And we were divided in 14 houses initially. So us who were 10, were paired up with older girls, were like 15, 16, to clean the house, to cook, to go collect wood, and also to stamp the maize. We used to wake up at about 5, clean the whole compound, and in January the grass was very long. Cut the grass. We were among the lists to be brought to Chipembe was a sickle to cut the grass. And in January the grass was much taller than us. Then, of course, because it was a mission school, we started with prayers every morning. And then Wednesday, we had Bible study. Sunday, we went early in the morning to the surrounding villages to preach the gospel. And at age 15, I had a Sunday school certificate, which was really like a preaching certificate, because when we went around the villages, we were sharing the gospel. Then we came back to our own church. We had the Girl Guides movement there also, which was very helpful when we were growing up.
Interesting. So that was your Chipembe experience, okay?
Yes.
Then you transitioned to go to university. Please talk to us about that.
Okay, what happened actually, my forefathers have been obsessed with education. And King Lewanika himself, you know, there was this SADC, what I call the foundation of SADC, between King Mushweshwe of Lesotho and King Kama of Kama and the King of Borosland. They always discussed which colonial government to go with, because they saw the force that was coming had no choice. So they had to work for how they would compromise, how they will survive. And actually, King Lewanika and even Lesotho, they sent some of their children to school. King Lewanika's children went to school in 1902 in Kent, England. And yes, and the idea was go and find out about these people. What are they like? So that when they come here, we are ready to negotiate with them. Yes. And the nation will be interested. The 2 boys who went before 1902, of course, was the father of the present Lutunga Imwiko, and the great-grandfather of the former Vice President, Honorable Inonge Mutukwa Wina. So then, actually, when the gospel was introduced, it was brought by people from Basutoland. There had been a political incident in 1840. One of the kings of Lesotho came and conquered Barosiland because there was already a dispute about who is the king. Normally, there's a consensus. Yeah. But in 1840, the southern part of Barosiland, Sinanga, had a candidate. Then the northern part, Kalabo side, had a candidate. And for the first and rare time, they couldn't agree on who is going to be a king. So they fought each other. And King Sibitwani from Lesotho arrived at that time, of course, just ran over the south, ran over the north and established himself as king of Barosland for 40 years.
Wow.
And he was a good king. I think that's how he lasted. But then when he died, his son Sekeletu was not a good leader. So that is why when the Baros kingdom, there is no automatic accession that just because your father was Litunga, you will be. The people choose from among all male members of the royal family who they think is best.
Which is a form of democracy, Ambassador.
It's amazing. If you really study, if you are talking about democracy, it's nothing. Study the history of democracy in Barosland, and I think we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
And you will be happy to know that the first ruler was a woman called Mbuywa Mwambwa. And the only reason it turned male because she only had 2 sons. She didn't have daughters. But the whole establishment is the Litunga, and then what we can call deputy Litunga is always a woman. And when the king, the Litunga, is not there, the deputy king called Litunga Lambwela. That means the Litunga of the south, because she's always, her station is in the Sinanga area. She is the one who acts for the kingdom. That's third in line is also a woman in the Kalabo area called Mbwandikana. Then you have Sisheke, a male. Then you have Analiere Kaoma, a male. And then you have Lukul, a male. So we really have had 20% female representation hundreds of years, long before the Beijing Platform of Action in 1985.
Amazing. Amazing. So this notion, we shall be throwing in things as we go. We are not going to follow the script. Let's just talk. So
let's just talk. I think so. Yeah, but maybe I can explain more. What happens is let's finish about education and King Lewanika. So when the gospel first came, he said, I know already about God. Don't tell me about God. We know God, because they believed in one God called Nyambe. They also believed in the life after. So he said, God we know.
Yes.
We just want to know how to read and write.
Wow.
So you can see that, and it's not only peculiar to Barosland. If you check all our kingdoms and chiefdoms, they had their own vision. They had their own agenda. Anything that was brought, first they inspected and see if it fits in their program.
Yes.
But anyway, eventually, King Lewanika was impressed by the gospel through actions of what the missionaries did. But then he wanted schools to be established in his kingdom so that people can know how to read and write. And you, as in America, you will be interested to know in the 1890s, when King Lewanika was pushing for education for his people, that's exactly the time when Booker T. Washington in the United States was pushing for education for the Negroes, as it was called that time, the African Americans. So, but the people didn't like that. Not that they didn't want to know how to read and write, but they were afraid of collecting children in one place because the Portuguese were abducting people and children into the slave trade. So they refused to send their children to schools initially. So King Lewanika was an amazing man, really, an amazing man. He didn't forego his vision. He had several wives, I think about 12. And I think in the whole, there were not that many that time, but altogether, the children who lived to be adults were 44. So when the people refused, he just collected both his boys and girls and started school in his family. So in Barosland, we have had girls in school since the 1890s.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's amazing, Ambassador.
And maybe to continue with education, I understand the king and his councils used to go and inspect the school books and told them, this is too much theory. We want practical education. So he kept pressing until most of the schools had theory in the morning and practical in education, practical in the afternoon. But
When
the
you say
missionaries,
practical, what do you mean? What was the practical part of it?
brick making, carpentry, fishing, farming. You know, for them, their vision was for people to go to school
Okay.
and be relevant still in the village.
That's
So
very
that the missionaries were a bit slow. That is why the king established the Barosi National School in 1906, which was a vocational and skills training school, technically.
National School.
Yes, Barosi National School. That was by the Barosi government in 1906. So in most of these schools, if you finish the standard 4, which is like 6 years, you can, most of them stopped at that because the secondary schools were few. You can build your own house, and the first furniture in your house, the chairs, the bed, are done by you. And then the farming, harvesting, fielding, storage for food were also done. So the girls had a part. The men always started the fallow ground.
Yes.
And then the women planted, weeded, harvest was joint men and women. And then you had storages of food, millet, sorghum, maize, and later rice. So if there was a drought for many years in Barosland, 2 or 3 years, it had no effect because you had about 4 or 5 storage places of different types of grain and pumpkins and so forth.
Interesting. Ambassador, let's take a break. When we come back, I want you to start talking about your experience as a student in the United States. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to explore the heart of the nation's capital? Join AZDMV and the Organization of Zambians Abroad for an exciting charter up bus tour of Washington, D.C. on Saturday, October 26, 2024. Choose from 2 convenient tours. The first bus departs at 9 to 11:55 a.m. and the second leaves at 12 noon to 3 p.m. Pickup point is the Hilton Garden Inn Arlington Shirlington Hotel. We'll visit 4 iconic sites: the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, and the Washington Monument, giving you the full DC experience. For just $50. Secure your spot and make lasting memories. For inquiries, contact Richard at +1 443 455 0455 and pay via Cash App or Zelle at azdmvunitedstates@gmail.com. Don't wait, seats are limited. Book your seat today, and let's tour DC together. AZDMV's got you covered. We're here to make sure you have an unforgettable experience.
Welcome back. Our guest this morning is Dr. Inonge Mbikusta Lewanika, diplomat, author, women's rights activist, children, everything, professor, lecturer. Ambassador, let's switch to your to your education experience in the United States. So how did you find yourself in the United States?
Wait, before we switch, just briefly, as I told you that Shmembi was a mission school.
Yes.
I told you that my father translated the Bible. And what I didn't tell you is that third mission station in Barosland was built in my mother's village. So I grew up in what they call a Christian home, where we read the Bible, we went to Sunday school, and then of course it was carried off at Shmembi, as I told you. We prayed every morning. And at the age of 15, I was beginning to question if God is really there. And what disappointed me about God was what happens in the world. We have thieves, we have criminals, we have murderers. So my conclusion that if God was God, he should be in charge of these people. There should be no stealing, no criminals, that kind. So that age when it's that age where you question everything.
Yes.
And fortunately, at that questioning period, this was a girls' school. Everything was about women. The teachers were women. Everything was female.
There were no male teachers or anybody in the administration.
No, in fact, what happened, once in a while we had stray lions nearby. So when there was a stray lion, we used to shout, "Hide, run for your life." So if a male from the villages or whatever appeared, it was the same. Run for your life, Musangwa, and you all run. So at
my goodness.
that period, when I was questioning, a female teacher was sick, and they could not find a female substitute. So they found an old man called Mr. Benz, Burans, and I'm spelling because I speak Zamlish. English was maybe my 7th or 8th, and I cannot pronounce an R in between.
What nationality was he? What nationality?
I think they were all from England. I can't remember exactly where they came from. So he was so old, he was like our grandfather, and I think that's why he was allowed to come. So we befriended him and used to discuss. And then I told him how disappointed I was with God. And then there was a fire in the village, which was bad. And those patients were brought to the mission clinic. So that is really when I got angry with God, that he should not have allowed that fire. And in our discussion, Mr. Benz told me, God is very interested in your questions. And we started going through the Bible with him. I don't know how we got to Jeremiah 29, verse 13. You shall seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. Yes. And I grabbed that verse and I said, aha, God, I got you now. I'm going to seek you. I'll search for you. And if you don't show up, forget about me. So that is how I was led to accept the Lord Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, personally. Not because my father translated a Bible, not because my mother led us to Sunday school, not that we prayed in the house and read the Bible. So
at age, how old were you at that stage?
I was 16. And during that stage, you do things in groups. My friends were Ompin Kumbula, Charity Kapotwe, Faith Kasokolo, Kekelo Anyai. Well, like we had this group, you do everything together. You just do what your friends are doing. So when I had this experience, my friends didn't have that experience. But I talked them into the catechumen class where you prepare for baptism so that I can be in this group. And then the I don't know what to call it, the pressure to accept the Lord was very heavy on me, but my friends were not ready. So, but they did go to this preparation class, and as I was conniving to say, how shall I convince them also to be baptized? They called me just before, and I don't even know if they remember. They said, Inonge, this is as far as we go. If we think we are going to prepare for baptism, forget it. And really, that was the biggest problem in my life. I struggled. It was the first time I had to take a stand on my own. I accepted the Lord Jesus. I was baptized.
Amen.
And around that time, or soon after that, my father was in the United States. 1959, he was going all over the United States, mainly looking at colleges, and he was doing other things. In fact, he also met Martin Luther King. He also met President Kennedy before he was sworn in, and he had already won. So he was being shown governance, and but he also visited what you call historical Black colleges, Tuskegee, Jackson State University. He went to all the universities, but he was very impressed with the African American universities.
Okay.
So that is when he started inquiring that he wanted his children to come to America. And the main reason he was interested in American education, it was its flexibility. You can go to school, drop and work and come back. You can take a few courses and work. So he was really very impressed. So when he went to Jackson State, he applied for my brother, our oldest brother, Arthur Manangono, Mbikusta Lewanika went. earlier than me, and he was going to put me there. Also, by the way, my brother went with Star Yamba, the son of Mr. Doubt Yamba, one of the fathers you need to know.
Yes.
So wherever he was looking for scholarships. Sometimes they were full scholarships, sometimes it was admission. And then when he went to California and they were taking him around, he was so impressed with junior colleges where you go like for 2 years. So that is how he applied for me to go to Orange Coast College in Costa Mesa, Orange County. And anyway, my journey was this now. So I am accepted at age of 17. One of our relatives, the daughter of Litunga Lambuela, the number 2 in the kingdom, for them, they had money. Actually, they had more money than my father. So my father applied for both of us. And me, I didn't have a scholarship, but my niece had a scholarship. So I was comforted that 2 of us were going to the US. But then suddenly she decided to get married and she was not going. And back to, I don't want to go alone. I don't want to go. And you know, in our days, when your parents said you are going, no matter how you are fuming, you just say, yes, sir. So at age 17, we were in Usakile African Township, but the airport was in Ndola.
Okay.
So my parents drove me to Ndola against my wishes. And I had another spiritual experience. I was leaving my parents. As I was boarding the plane, I looked down. And I don't know where I had heard that the children of Israel, wherever they went, they took a piece of soil to remember their land. So when I looked down at the soil, the Lord told me, you don't have to take a piece of soil. I am with you.
Amen.
Yeah, so that gave me confidence to go. So I went, we passed through Sudan, Khartoum. It was hot. And then we stopped at Shannon Island.
What airline was it? Can you remember what airline was it?
Central African Airlines. Africa was united. Central African Airlines.
An airline. Wow.
That's right. So then I arrived from Shannon. I arrived in Los Angeles, and my father had organized for me to live with American families.
Okay.
So Mr. and Mrs. Downing and their children came to meet me at the airport, and they welcomed me. Among the first questions they asked me is, do you wear clothes in Africa? CLOTHES. And I was so surprised.
Wow.
And then when we arrived at home, they were telling me, this is a spoon, this is a fork, this is a plate. I'm just puzzled. Then they were asking me about Tarzan, how it is to live with lions and so forth. Now in Usakile, we used to watch Tarzan. We knew it was Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah.
But in America, they thought we live with lions. So then I told my parents, and my mother sent pictures. That time we were living in Salisbury because my father was a federal MP with Mr. Yamba, Mr. What was that? Kakumbi. We had 4 or 3 Africans in the Rhodesian parliament. Although Zambia just liked to focus on my father, you'll be happy to know Mr. Mwanakato was also a member of the United Federal Party, UFP, at that time. So, you know, in Salisbury, they actually had escalators at that time.
Oh, wow.
So when I would go around in Los Angeles, I remember one time we were approaching an escalator and they automatically all went back to see if I would cry or frighten. And I just majestically stepped on the escalators. So as I was getting shocked at their questions, they were also getting shocked. So that is how I was at Orange Coast College. And then I have been a hyper all my life, running around because, you know, most of my siblings were male. And we climbing trees and doing all those things. So I wanted to major in physical education.
Okay.
And my father said, you are doing home economics.
Why insist on home economics?
And again, because he wanted me to be able to sit still, cook a meal, sew something, decorate the house. So, and in America, home economics actually is very, very broad. You do chemistry and nutrition, you do child development, you do management of the home, you do budgeting, you do landscaping, you do interior decorating, and you do fashion models. We were sewing with our eyes on Paris, those fashions. In Paris, you don't remember those fashion shows? They're still there. So it's really very broad and very empowering. So that's what I did for the first 4 years. But my interest later was really children. And that's another story. I've been obsessed with children all my life. Then when I of course, and then there's one thing about my life, the Lord has impressed upon me that wherever I go, the first thing is to find a church. And not just as a churchian who sits on the chair, but to do something. So even in the US, even when I lived in Germany, I was teaching Sunday school. And actually, I come from a family that does not sing, but because the Lord told me to be active, at one time I even sang in the choir. And my Chipembi girls will tell you, they called me Chilea, which is terrible. So then... And then we were at Orange Coast College was also George Mumbuna. His father was one of our founding fathers leaders, and he was in the first parliament in Zambia. And then my brother in English, but my first cousin, the late senior chief Isteketo, Chief Amkena. We went there. George Mumbuna's father, they only had 2 children. So they had more money than my father. My father took care of the whole Sakil. Anybody who had no home was there. So my brother, Boma Kweti, Isteketo Lewanika, and I were working on campus. And then later another brother came who also became a senior chief volunteer in Kauma. For him, he was a janitor. When the other people go home, he was sweeping the floors. So for us, we worked. I mean, there is this notion in Zambia. I don't know whether it's UNIP who spread it, that the British gave us money, that we had a trust fund. I have no idea how that circulated. I was working as a cook. I was taking care of cooking for the elderly. I was babysitting in addition to teaching Sunday school. But what was exciting was that there was an association for African students and then an international association. So we had friends from South America. We really had a good time. But I tell you, at Chipembi also, we had a wonderful time. We were laughing every day. And one thing about Chipembi, when I was 10, we used to sleep on cement.
Oh, wow.
Just cement. And then later on, we got beds that had no mattresses, BED. And then we started making our own mattresses. You take a blanket and you sew it yourself 3 parts. You go and collect grass, put it inside, and you had a mattress. But we were so happy. I don't know what was funny. We were laughing from that time we wake up until we fall asleep. It was really a wonderful time. So it was also the same in America. I made a lot of friends. I was heading all sorts of associations, received a lot of awards. Then after the community college, I went to San Luis Obispo, which is Central America, right exactly halfway between Los Angeles and also San Francisco, teaching Sunday school, being in all sorts of associations, having a good time. So when I finished 4 years, I got a Bachelor of Science, and I wanted to come home.
Okay.
And my father said, go for your master's. I really was so disappointed. But as I told you, nowadays, you just say, yes, sir.
Yeah, you just
yes, sir. And for my generation and I, we really wanted to come home. So what I did when I was forced to do a master's, I attended every summer school. And at my college, we had 2 sessions.
So that you finish quickly.
So I did 2 the 4-week summer session, the 6-week summer session. So I got my master's degree in education and psychology at age 22.
Wow. How long did it take you? It must have been a year or 2 years since you did all this.
The master's was just around a year, because all those summer schools actually was equivalent to a year. And that's another thing that my father liked. It was not a British system where you study for 3 years, then they ask you two questions, and then you have failed or passed.
Okay.
Now, I was given a California Teachers Association because I was also specializing in teaching, and I refused that certificate.
Why?
I didn't even, because my mind was on Zambia. Now I regret, actually, I should have kept it as a souvenir. But we were so obsessed with finishing and coming home. Then as I was going to the end of my master's, I was given that offer, this 6 weeks tour of America that the United States government gives. They gave me that offer. As the days were getting close.
What was it about? What was it about, the 6 weeks tour of America?
It's still there. You go all over the states. They show you their judiciary. They show you the government at state level, how they organize their government education. So you go to many, many states. You see their historical places. You visit their universities. I think it still goes on right now. They still do it. For those they think are upcoming leaders. You know, they are always watching over us. Imagine I was 21, 22. They have already spotted me as a leader, and they want to expose me to their way of life. But unfortunately, as the weeks were getting close, I declined. Now, again, I regret. I should have just enjoyed myself.
You specialized in declining. Eh?
I tell you, I was so focused. I guess because my parents were Africans and Africanists. And like King Lewanika and his group, they knew their history, they knew their background, they knew their culture, but they were always learning.
Yes.
Yeah, they were always taking what fits in their vision. And what you'll be interested in, King Yeta, the son who became king after King Lewanika, in 1937, when he was invited to the coronation in England, he is the one who took the passport pictures of his delegation in the palace. Just as an example, here they know their background, their culture, they know what's good for them. Like Lewanika was obsessed with reading and writing and education. So all his people were trained. What is good for you and fits in your vision, you take it.
Ambassador, very quickly as we wind up this part one of our conversation about your life, you are an African student in segregated America. How was that experience?
It was quite interesting. Yes, it was segregated time, but my advantage, I was brought up as a human being, a first citizen. I mean, there was no notion in my upbringing that I'm second class. So all those segregations actually just bounced off. That's number one. Number two,
when you say bounce off, how did you do it? How?
Just by being confident and walking straight and people getting out of my way and being so active. I was a leader in all these associations, the clubs that you have in University in America. But there's one incident that really hit me, although it didn't affect me because it was too late. And being saved and born again. First of all, being raised as a human being, full 100%, and then you accept Jesus, and your identity comes from God. There's no human being who can make you less. But there was one incident. I think you in America know homecoming, and now you are doing it even in nursery schools. For us, it was in college. So I actually won as Miss our university. I won as the queen for homecoming at Cal Poly. California Polytechnic College. It was a polytechnic when we started. And then where I was living, I woke up one day and there were posters and placards that beat nigger, B-E-A-T, nigger. So this is in California now, where they say there's no segregation.
Yeah.
And then when they took pictures of us who won, for me, they put the worst picture. And one man resigned from the committee. But I ended up being the first princess because they could not take me as the queen of the school. So that is one segregation that I experienced firsthand, but it could not affect me. I moved on. But you'll be interested to know, I also participated as an activist, as a student. There was that Pan-African movement, which was very strong. For example, when Malcolm X was shot, we sent people to his funeral among us from the different states.
Wow.
And then
Can you remember where was his funeral? Which state was his funeral?
New York. It was in New York. He was gunned down in New York. And we were really, we were following his speeches. We were very sorry, but we were united for Africa. And this spirit of Africa being one also started here in Africa with the African National Congress. Maybe we can talk about that later.
It's a transition to that, yes.
Yeah, but then in Mississippi, my brother, remember, was going to Jackson State in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living with this actually, I don't like the term white and black. There's really nobody who's black and white, especially since the devil is white and the angel of light and has been translated that is black. So really, I don't use that vocabulary. Yeah. I think I like this African thing. Yeah. Although those who called Europeans during the colonial days, whether they came from Europe or not, are now calling themselves Africa, because now Africa is a thing that is on the stage. So when I said I'm going to Mississippi, and you remember Mississippi 1962?
Yeah.
The Freedom Riders were riding, two white students were killed.
Yeah.
So these white families told my father that she shouldn't go to Mississippi. It's a dangerous place. But then my father told them, well, that time I was 19. He said, well, she's old enough. She can, she can go.
Now
and then my own feeling was, if my brother is there and there are other human beings there, I can go. So I did go to Mississippi. I met some of the freedom fighters like James Meredith. And of course, my brother later. And after that incident of shooting people in Memphis, and they couldn't hold grudge, FBI were looking after him. Have you finished?
No, I'm still here, Ambassador. I can hear you. The Wi-Fi is frozen. Okay, there you go. I can see you. Yes, please continue. Yeah, please continue. Okay, all right. Ambassador's Wi-Fi is frozen, and we will continue this conversation, and we appreciate everybody being with us. Hope you are enjoying the discussion, your comments, and all the history that she's sharing. Ambassador, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Ambassador? All right. What we shall do is we'll transition from here and pick up this conversation. I think I'll allow her to deal with her Wi-Fi on her end. And ladies and gentlemen, let's see if Ambassador can come back. Hello, Ambassador. All right. What we shall do is this will mark the end of part one of our conversation with Ambassador Dr. Inonge Mbikusta Lewanika. We are talking about reflecting on Zambia's 60 years of independence, the foundation. What she has basically given us is a history from her life as a young person growing up in that environment. So we thought we'd take that route. When we continue this conversation on October 26th, Saturday, we shall pick up on looking at what exactly was happening in the liberation movement. When she went back home, what she found, and what exactly was going on, and what her involvement was. So we'll pick up this conversation when we come back for part 2. And please stay tuned, and thank you for joining us on this first part. And we look forward to you being part of this conversation. Please tell a friend, share, follow us on social media, and we shall continue our conversation. Some of you do ask and say you'd like to know when things are coming up. Let me show you. Those are our social media handles. Just go to ZNBC TV and you will find us there, and we shall pick up the conversation on Saturday, October 26th. That's just
Zambia's 60th independence is here. Are you ready to celebrate in style? Get your exclusive and wear your style of Zambia at 60 t-shirts and proudly stand out. Show your love for Zambia with a design that's bold, unique, and perfect for this special day. One shirt is just $40, or grab 2 for $70. It's the perfect way to share the pride with friends and family. Ready to order? It's easy. Send your payment via Zelle, +1 817 501 1615 or Cash App, $Pastor Nate. For questions, email us at zbtr2009@gmail.com. Don't wait, pre-order now, wear your style, and let's celebrate Zambia's freedom in style.